Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. What a tremendous fight. I think we knew that Fabio Wardley versus Frazer Clarke, where there'd been quite a lot of tetchiness in the build-up, a lot of back and forth ribbing, both vowing to knock each other out. I think we knew it was going to deliver something pretty good, either in the form of a knockout or just good action where we could enjoy as heavyweight fans. And it more than delivered. And I've got to say, Frazer Clarke, best performance of his career. Fabio Wardley, maybe not the best performance, but he really gutted it out in those later rounds. And given the fact he looked pretty gassed after 8 rounds, he did pretty well to finish strong and actually take a couple of those later rounds. And that proved important in what was the split draw. So the scorecards 114, 113, 115, 112 to Clarke, and 111, 113, 113 a draw. So split draw, and I'm not mad at it. I thought this was a very back and forth fight where Frazer Clarke started well. Fabio Wardley started to come into it and obviously got a knockdown. And then Fabio Wardley gave away a few rounds as he was tired. But it was just back and forth, rock'em sock'em action. And it was an incredibly fun fight to watch. These fights, sometimes at this level, don't always deliver. Sometimes it can turn out one guy's overmatched. It doesn't end up living up to the billing. But this well and truly did. And with a split draw, there is always the chance to see it all again. And to be honest, I think that would be a very good thing to see. Because tremendous fight. I can't stress that enough. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't always the best in terms of the technical stuff because Fabio Wardley was wild and brash at some points, and arguably the level of his gas tank had a lot to do with the fact that he was wasting a lot of energy. This was a fight in which Fabio Wardley, especially the first couple of rounds, as Frazer Clarke was really composed. He was working the jab well. He was starting to land his right hand. He looked like he was taking control of the fight early. Fabio Wardley was wild. He was reckless and a bit brash, sometimes missing wildly. And those wild swings, you know, that takes a lot of energy out of you. And he was sometimes, with the way that he moves in and out, just with the overall activity, what he does, it certainly wasn't as efficient as Frazer Clarke, where there was far less wasted energy. But Frazer Clarke, you know, through the back of his jab and the right hand, and at times some very vicious uppercuts. Certainly Fabio Wardley hasn't learned anything from Dillian Whyte, because Whyte can't defend an uppercut. You know, Wardley ate those right throughout the fight. But so too Frazer Clarke, and both these guys at time guilty, very little head movement. Wardley was able to at times telegraph what was coming, and he was still landing the right hand, looping right hand with regularity. And if you actually look at what happened midway through the fight, Frazer Clarke, and I'll just get to the exact round, round 7, and this ended up being pivotal, because there was a point deducted. Steve Gray deducted a point from Frazer Clarke, and as the judges' scores were at the end with the split draw, Clarke must be ruining what could have been had he not shoveled a shot downstairs and had a point taken. And you could argue maybe that it was a little bit harsh of the referee, because I didn't really remember any warnings ahead of that, but apparently the commentary was saying that there were a few gestures before from the referee that was the third time. I don't remember any strong warnings, but Clarke must be ruining what happened, because he only has himself to blame in that situation. We've seen, Clarke has form for this in the past. Obviously a lot of shots strayed low versus Dave Allen, who really hammed it up. But also, the knockdown proved pivotal for Fabio Wardley. So he has Frazer Clarke, a big right hand on him, and that starts off a chain of events, which about 20 or 30 seconds later sees Clarke on the floor. Wardley jumps on him after that right hand, and he's sort of following him across the ring, just unloading. And the final couple of shots before Frazer Clarke went down, it wasn't as consequential, but he was off balance, and he was down on the canvas. So my card, I had them splitting the rounds, 6 apiece. So with the point deduction, and also then you have the 10-8 round, I have a card that says 114, 112 to Wardley. But the thing is, there were 2 or 3 really hard to score rounds. And when the viewer's scorecard was popping up on the screen, or the commentator's card, there were a couple of rounds where I was like, well, it could go either way. And if I change a couple around on my scorecard, I could easily have it just pipped to Clarke. So a draw is a fair result. I know I don't want to hear anyone saying robbery, because it wasn't. This was a very back and forth fight. You know, both these guys were landing heavy leather. I think the more flashy shots in general coming from Fabio Wardley, and obviously with the knockdown, there were a couple of times where both guys were rocked. In that 12th round, Fabio Wardley took a big shot, and it looked like he could be there for the taking, but it was a bit too late in the round. He managed to stay on his feet. So you got to say, Wardley has got a great chin, and so too Clarke, because he took a lot of punishment. But I think one of the things that sort of let Frazer Clarke down at the end, you know, he was boxing pretty smart, certainly the best performance of his career to date. I know in the past I've been critical of him, saying that, you know, it's pretty straight up and down, no special effects, very workmanlike, and it largely was again against Fabio Wardley. But what you had was, I think, just an enhanced version of that. He did rise to the occasion, and he met the guy in front of him, and perhaps because he had a better opponent in front of him who was willing to trade, willing to throw shots, he was able to show us a little bit more of what's in the arsenal. But ultimately, though, he probably will be ruining what happened with the low blow and obviously that knockdown. But, you know, I want to see this again. If not, I guess Frazer Clarke, and probably also for boxers' sake, they're going to look at that and go, we can still invest in this guy, market him to the public, given the performance. Because I think ahead of this, there was certainly a lot of people talking that Frazer Clarke had largely disappointed so far. Hadn't really had too many sort of highlight reel moments in his career, and he just looked okay. Just looked okay too many times. It's not like he was really shifting the needle, but with a performance like that against a willing partner in Fabio Wardley, I think his stock rises, even in a draw. It was a very good performance, and he was very close to taking that one. Fabio Wardley, we know he's a work in progress, and they have kept him at that sort of British level, maybe for a bit longer than some of us would have liked to have seen. But I think given, you know, he's got no real sort of amateur experience to speak of, he's been learning on the job and obviously in the gyms, sparring and trying to get better. This exemplified why they have been keeping him here, because he's still got some things to polish. I think perhaps early on, nerves got the best of him, and he let Frazer Clarke sort of take those first couple of rounds, but he certainly bounced back in a big way in the fight. And he had some of the biggest moments in the fight, and obviously that's helped his cause here. It could have easily been a Frazer Clarke win, and Fabio Wardley, I wrote down some notes, and after 6 rounds, both these guys were looking tired, but by round 8, Fabio Wardley was looking absolutely exhausted, and you sort of thought, if Frazer Clarke can just keep wearing him down, he can take him out here. There probably needed to be another round or two potentially, because Wardley, one of the things that worked against him was obviously the nose injury. He took a couple of really big shots to the nose early on. The damage just kept getting worse, so that kind of helped his breathing. And I guess the other thing as well, that sort of over his right eye, that mouse that was just building up, and it would have been harder to see in those last couple of rounds as that was getting worse and worse and worse. So you got to say, a lot of heart and determination, and Fabio Wardley really gutted out those final rounds. Arguably a little bit of a second wind, because there were moments where you sort of thought a couple of shots, you know, strong breeze will knock him over, but then he'd sort of out of nowhere respond with a flurry, and sometimes actually hurt Frazer Clarke. A couple of times where he rocked him either with a body shot or with a big right hand, and Clarke had to back off, or, you know, he'd sort of retreat momentarily, and Fabio Wardley needed those little moments just to keep himself with the energy where he was at. He'd sort of respond at the right time to get Clarke off him. He obviously had enough power where Frazer Clarke couldn't just try to walk through him to try and get the job done. So, yeah, this was a fantastic fight. I didn't watch it live. This is one of my videos a number of hours later, but I was trying all day to avoid seeing the results and watch videos of other people, all this sort of stuff. But I was pleasantly surprised by how good a fight it was to watch. It's sometimes a little bit sloppy, but overall, when you consider it was at a British title and Commonwealth level, that was some pretty high quality viewing action for our pleasure. And I hope that we get to see it again, because I think there is something, after this first fight that, they can do it all again. And given they sold more than 10,000 tickets for that event, you can kind of look at these guys now to go, well, that's a pretty strong showing. Sure, Florian Marku was on the undercard, would have sold a few thousand of those. But a big part of the success of that event and selling more than 10,000 tickets at the O2 was it was a very good matchup. Fabio Wardley and Frazer Clarke. I mean, heading into it, we had these questions. The razzmatazz, the fast reflexes and power of Fabio Wardley, with a very sort of limited amateur sort of pedigree, or no amateur pedigree, just a few white-collar fights. And Frazer Clarke said his pedigree from the amateurs would make Fabio Wardley pay. And actually, at times, what he was saying, he was looking cool and composed, wasn't wasting much energy. He looked like he might sort of pull this one out. Ultimately a draw, and I'm not mad at it. I wouldn't mind seeing it again. And these guys are slowly building themselves into much bigger names based off this performance, and I think they could probably get close to selling, quite a few thousand more tickets if they did have the rematch and had a very similarly strong undercard. It was a very good card overall. And how often in recent times have we been able to say that of some of the fare that we've been getting out of Boxer? It's been pretty hit or miss, mostly miss. But this was a good card with a great main event, which panned out and delivered, I think, everything that the fans wanted, except the knockout. I thought it was going to come, and at some points it could have been either guy that could have been taken out. But good chins on display, and hopefully they run it back. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.